Okay. Pankration Philosophy, episode 217. I'm your host, Pocholo Cruz. Welcome to the show, everybody. We got a special guest here today. Go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
All right, my name is Ryan Scialoia. I've been training martial arts most of my life, 15 plus years. Started in karate, got my black belt in that, and then transferred over to Jiu-Jitsu, got my black belt in that. Taught at many different schools and have some BJJ Fanatics instructionals, and I also teach law enforcement as well.
Well, thanks for joining us, Ryan. And I guess let's go back for your training. I guess how did you get started training karate?
Ah, interesting. Okay. My mom signed me up.
Okay.
Way back in the day. I think I was like 11 or 12.
11 or 12. Okay.
And, I was like right on the border where, there was like a kids class, but then there was an adults class.
Okay.
And I was put in the kids class, but I didn't really like it. And then I finally got put in the adults class, and I really, saw that there's something to this, and fell in love with it and just became obsessed, and then found jiu-jitsu and became obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
And can't think of any activity that I love to do more.
Okay. So I guess like for you, so I guess when your martial arts, learning started, I mean, as you know, you've been in it so long, people come and go. I guess like what made you like want to keep with it, or what made you want to stick with it? Like when you were starting, like when you're like 11 or 12, what made you think like, okay, I guess I'll keep doing this thing?
I've been asked this before,
mm-hmm.
and it's interesting. Like, people are like, oh, haven't you like ever thought of quitting? And I mean, I guess, but like, I just love martial arts so much
mm-hmm.
that like for as long as I could remember, I've just accepted it as it's a part of my life, and
mm-hmm.
quitting or stopping just doesn't even like
it just doesn't even go. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, because it's like at a point where since it's such a part of your life, it's like, not brushing your teeth, or like not showering, like, oh, that just be weird, why would I just stop that? Right. It's like just becomes such a general part. Like if anything, it's not even the fact of you thinking about, it's like you can't imagine like not doing it. So.
Right. I saw this Arnold Schwarzenegger podcast.
Okay.
Where they asked him, like, when do you think you're gonna stop working out? And he was like, what?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't even make sense. Like, it's ingrained in who I am. It's a part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the thing that jogged my memory is he said that it's as much a part of me as like brushing my teeth, or like just doing the normal things that I do every day. So
yeah,
I feel the same way about.
Yeah, it's like it's not out of your routine. It is the routine.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. In fact, it being not in your life, now that's out of the routine. Now that would be like, oh, I didn't do that today. Okay. And I guess so started karate, and then got to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I guess in terms of the I guess like when did you did you compete in karate, or did you do any of the karate competitions? Yeah.
A little bit. I was always more into the coach role, but I did a couple karate competitions, and it was never like something that I really loved. Was like point sparring competitions, and there was like not such a real kind of practical aspect of that, which I didn't think was too cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like full contact karate tournaments and stuff, and that was like much more real thing. But I never fell in love with like getting punched in the head in any regard.
Yeah.
And I always just found that I loved jiu-jitsu the most, and wanted to make that my thing,
Cool. And then, okay, yeah. So you mentioned, yeah, you trained and then, became a coach. I guess like, so how did the coaching like first start? Like for you, like what opportunities like happened there?
That's actually an interesting kind of question, and my life kind of took an interesting turn where
Hmm.
I was like, 13, 14, 15, really training a lot, like all day after school. And there was something called a leadership program at the karate school.
Okay.
And I enrolled in the leadership program. And it was like you could intern, you could start to teach like a couple classes. You learned like how to actually teach, how to actually like run a martial arts school. And I
Mhm.
just really sort of took to it to such a degree that I really I got a job there. I got a full-time job there.
Oh,
And then I was in like 10th grade working a full-time job like 7 hours a day after school.
wow. Okay.
Um, where I was like I was going to school in the morning and then I had a full adult job
Yeah.
at nighttime. So it was a crazy time. I can't believe like I couldn't do that same like schedule now.
Yeah.
But um but yeah, I started it so young, and it just became my whole life, and
Mm.
just lived like a really interesting kind of like high school type area where
Mhm.
I wasn't really interested in what the teachers were teaching me at school.
Yeah.
And I was a an idiot kid, and I was like, I make more money than this teacher anyway, so
Yeah.
what could they tell me?
Yeah.
And
What's this teacher teaching me, really?
yeah, so silly kind of mindset and stuff. But that's what you do when you're ignorant and young, and just really kind of focused all of my attention in martial arts. And then there was like a martial arts expo kind of thing that my instructor would put on, and I
Okay.
saw jujitsu at one of those.
Like expos.
At one of those expos. And to me, like my karate instructor was like this
Yeah.
god, like undefeatable.
Mhm.
And he did some sparring with the jiu-jitsu guy, and I just could not believe what I was watching. And I was like, oh man, I got to learn some of this stuff.
Okay, got it. So yeah, you're coaching karate, went to an expo, saw Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I guess so. Were you still like teaching karate and then also learning BJJ, or how did that transition happen?
We had 2 classes a week
Okay,
on Wednesdays and Fridays, and
okay,
I went to every single class, never missed a class ever.
yeah,
And there was like a period of many, many different instructors. It was really like humble beginnings. I was a white
hmm
belt for over 4 years,
hmm
and at some points, the class was taught by a blue belt.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
And the techniques that we learned were like precious nuggets of gold. And we're like so spoiled today where we have
yeah.
instructions from like the best guys that have ever done jujitsu just like at our
And the
fingertips.
information is just out there. Like you
Yeah.
can access it. Yeah,
You
yeah.
could find podcasts like this, like find all different like philosophies and things to learn about. But it was humble beginnings, and I still loved it so much back then. And I knew Florida had a big. I live in Florida now. Had a
Okay.
big kind of jujitsu community, and
Mhm.
some people that I sort of knew down here, and moved to Florida and just made it like my full time thing.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, trained BJJ, made it like your full time thing, and of course, began coaching it and teaching there. I guess how did that transition then go? So when did you go from just like training BJJ to then to then like teaching others? Like how was that? How was that part of your journey?
Yeah, it was a bit of a difficult transition.
Mhm.
I had already gotten like my black belt in karate, and I sort of felt like I did like what I needed to do in karate.
Okay.
But I was, I think, like just gotten my blue belt at the time when I was 18 and moved down to Florida, and
Hmm.
I was just like, I got to learn this jujitsu thing, and I just can't. I can't like deny myself, like to have this knowledge and like to have my own school one day and to actually teach this in my school and get to the level that I wanted to get to.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was like so connected. I had such good relationships with the people at the karate school, a real genuine, love for my instructor and many of the people there. And it hurt. It hurt really bad to leave,
Hmm.
but I had to figure out what was going on with this jujitsu stuff.
Yeah, you had to separate, like spread your wings, get out of the nest, so to say.
Yes,
And,
exactly,
and
exactly.
then yeah, so you're there learning like learn learning BJJ, and then like how is I guess like how's that part of your journey like progressing? Like so did you say you got like a blue belt probably when you were 18, and then like
Yep.
what was the next part of your martial arts journey there?
Well, I had a little bit of money saved up from working like full time, and I lived
Mhm.
down here, and I just trained like full time,
Just
trained
train.
like
Okay.
12 hours a day, and it was at the school called Gracie Baja Kissimmee.
Okay.
It's in Kissimmee, Florida, and I had known a couple of guys there in Mojo and Twista. Shout out to them, and we had great training. I really like upped my skill level, and eventually I got a job working for Marcio Simas, who's a coral belt and really is um, really brought jujitsu to Florida,
Okay. Okay.
is the OGs and legends of the game. And then I ended up like running his school and training under my professor, who's under him, Rodrigo Longo.
Got it.
Then just it became my life. I was doing the same, wake up,
Yeah.
uh, train, teach, sell memberships, run the school,
Mhm.
and then train again at night.
Got it. So pretty much like just more of the martial arts lifestyle, which had already been like pretty much part of you since you were like in high school, and then now it's just like adult wise now learning different martial art, but still bringing in like those same like, pretty much the same work ethic and your same enthusiasm for it. Okay. So then of course you trained up there, became and then became a black belt, and now like teaching, coaching in terms of that. I guess like what's keeping you, what's like what's your martial arts like day to day looking like now, like in terms of teaching, coaching, like classes, like how's that going? Yeah.
Well, currently I'm still recovering. I just had a hip surgery.
Okay. Okay.
It wasn't an injury from jiu-jitsu. It was like a congenital bone issue.
Okay.
So I had hip surgery. I'm still recovering from that. And lately it's really just been upgrading the software
Yeah.
and not so much using the hardware, but I still teach.
Yeah.
And I love teaching. I
Okay.
love when a student really starts to take on the techniques, philosophies, mindsets, concepts that I try to convey to them, and I can see
Mhm.
that it becomes a part of them too. That's like such a priceless, beautiful uh, transfer of knowledge, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
For sure. And I guess that brings a good point. So in terms of like the teaching aspect, like how did like let's like like how's your teaching, I guess, like changed like from when you first began like teaching to I guess to teaching now, like what's changed the most for you?
Oof, that's a great question. I've never been asked that question before. Um, how has my teaching changed? Hmm. I mean, I think there's like almost two prongs to that question.
Hmm.
One is like, um, how did the actual skill set
Yeah.
of teaching uh, improve over time, and how did the ability to teach the actual like what was the evolution of the teaching of the techniques themselves?
Mm. Okay. Okay. I guess for that, I guess let's go with the first prong then. Like, what was, in terms of teaching ability, because I think that's the thing. It's just because you're necessarily like proficient at something doesn't necessarily mean that you can teach it. And I'm sure, or it's like, just because I think the thing, especially especially having teaching coach people myself, I realize, oh, like what I learn is very, it's like, it's almost like I know, just because I know myself how to do it doesn't necessarily mean I can show others how to do it. It's like, because sometimes it's so ingrained that, oh, I don't quite, I can't quite see myself in like a third person. Like, okay, what exactly is this knowledge that I'm giving out here? Like,
Yes.
what are the pieces? You almost have to deconstruct like your own self through as, okay, like what am I actually imparting? So I think that's like one point I remember, like in terms of teaching. It's like, okay, I can't just, there's understanding, there's what I thought was understanding something, and then there's, oh wait, do I really understand this thing as deep as I thought I did? And then it's just really, I guess, like the actual depth in terms of knowledge, because I recall that. I guess yeah. So like for you, like when you're, I guess let's talk about present. So like when you're like when you're teaching now, like what's one thing that what's one thing that you do now that you did when you first started that I guess like was a big change for you? Yeah.
It so depends, because I think a big part of teaching is knowing your audience.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really depends who I'm teaching. I teach them differently
Yes.
based on the audience that I'm working with, and
For
especially
sure.
it changes so much if it's private lessons, if it's group classes or seminars or
Yeah.
instructionals or whatever. So I think that context is important too. Just to hit on a point that you hit on beautifully, is that I explained the same kind of thing that you were explaining there about, to get really good at a specific technique in jiu-jitsu, you want to like achieve that highest level of mastery, which is like that unconscious competence where you're able to do the move without thinking, without thought, and the move just happens. But one step below that unconscious competence is the conscious competence of being able to like work through each individual step. So I see a lot of guys that are actually incredible at jiu-jitsu and that really have amazing skills, but struggle to actually explain it because they don't go back and try to look at it from the eyes of the actual audience that they're teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a great tool of being able to know your audience, I believe this even won a Nobel Prize, was that model of unconscious incompetence. Someone doesn't even know what they don't know.
Yeah.
Conscious incompetence, where they sort of have some idea, they're just starting to like understand the depths of things, and then conscious competence, where they are really starting to get organized and like can break things down step by step, and then finally like to where they just can do the move without thinking. It's just a part of their like nervous system, and it's second nature to them. And I think teaching in a way where you know your audience, and you could figure out where the person is on that scale in the context that you're working with, I think is an essential part to teaching and getting the message through to the actual person where they are at that current time.
For sure. I think you hit a great point when you talk about like knowing your audience. It's because teaching can't occur with like a cookie cutter. Like person A is going to learn different than person B, person C is going to learn different than person A or B, and it's just a matter of, especially when you're talking about when it's like, let's say like a group class, let's say like more than 15 people. That's like a lot of different learning styles, different levels that you have to understand. And I think that's also one part of teaching that becomes better over time. It's just understanding the student, or understanding like who you're teaching, and how do they like how do they respond best to like communication, or what kind of communication, like are they visual? Do they need to like feel it? Is it like hearing? Like is it like auditory? Like they need to hear like cues and figuring that out. And I think that comes part with the yeah, in terms of teaching, in terms of like teaching, like I guess teaching style, you realize, oh, there's different learning styles, and there's different cues like for that, and different people will respond well. Of course, like no one's just like strictly one thing, but some people tend to be more dominant, just depending on past experiences or just how they operate. And and it's interesting as become more like progress as a teacher, you can see or like you can tell that, or you can read that like a lot faster in terms of that, and like realize, okay, this is what I'll do like here and here. So I guess so when it comes to okay, let's go back to that question. When it comes to, let's say you're teaching like a general class, like where there's varying degrees of levels, like how do you find like how do you find like how you're gonna reach like that? Let's say there's white belts and like blue belts like that are maybe like high blue belts, maybe almost purple. Like how would you teach like that kind of almost beginning and intermediate kind of class?
Right. I think that's such a great question. So to use a bit of an analogy, I loved your points too about the kinesthetic, auditory, visual learners and all that. I think is important. To use a bit of an analogy, I think when you're teaching a group class with a lot of different levels, you're teaching a wave of information, and everyone is sort of surfing that wave on their own surfboard. So knowing and understanding the difficulty of group instruction is important, because you have to be able to challenge the highest level person in the class, and you need to make it basic and simple enough to have the lowest level person in the class understand what you're actually talking about. So even combining with what you've asked me before, I think the thing that I've become better at and that I've increased at over time is to be able to teach on multiple levels at the same time. I think that's really the answer to that question of how do I challenge two students of completely different skill levels in the same class. And I think, just like how you learn Shakespeare in English class, like the lower level student can like understand the actual like the grammar, the words, the a bit of the story of things. But then the higher level students in the class will understand like the fundamental nature of reality and the concepts of the human condition behind the actual story of the Shakespeare text itself. So being able to interweave the technique or whatever it is that you're teaching into that multifaceted approach where a purple belt can understand and a white belt can understand is, I think, something that takes time, and that it takes some practice and it takes some thought and lesson planning, of course. And I think that answers your question.
Yeah.
As far as my thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think it's a great point. It's like, I like that wave of information, because there'll be people, more experienced. They'll be like, okay, they can go a bit, higher, like further out there. Whereas like somebody that's maybe, day one, or they're fairly new, they're like, oh, I'm just trying to get into the water, trying to survive like that. And so I think that's a pretty good point. It's like, figuring out like the levels, and because you can still have in the same scope, you can help like both, or all levels, in terms of that. It's just a matter of how you approach it and how you teach it. And so I think that's a good point. And I guess like furthermore in terms of that, so like when you're you mentioned you have like several instructionals. So when you do have an instructional, and I think that's a different kind of teaching too, because it's almost I personally haven't done an instructional. I've typically only taught like people. I guess like when it comes to you like forming how you're going to teach an instructional, like who do you, I guess, in that audience, since the audience I guess is broad, do you have like an audience like in mind when you're teaching that, and like how do you approach that kind of scope? Like let's say when you're filming an instructional.
Right, great question. So I think the main difficulty of teaching an instructional is that literally anyone could buy it. So
you don't know exactly who's getting the wave of information there.
Exactly. So there's this like tremendous propensity of the amount of different levels of people that could possibly be looking at this information. So I think that's one of the challenging things about an instructional, but um, I really try to boil down, okay, well, what are the actual principles here? What are the actual concepts here?
Mhm.
What is the context in which these moves sit in? And I do my best to explain what that is to give people the context and the understanding around the techniques to be able to, when they see the actual physical techniques, um, have like something to relate it to,
Mhm.
have a better understanding of it as a whole. So um, that's what I try to do as far as the instructionals, but also like, it is a challenging idea, that
Yeah,
literally anyone could watch it, you know.
yeah, for sure. I guess like what was like what was like the first instructional that you did? Like was it like on a certain technique, or what was what what did you cover on it?
First instructional I did was actually a law enforcement instructional.
Okay, law enforcement instructional. Okay.
I used to work security and stuff.
Okay. Okay.
So for anything like security wise or law enforcement wise. And, I treated that as if it was people that were completely new to
Mhm.
jiu-jitsu, and sort of was able to hone in better on that audience.
Got it. Got it. It's just yeah, in terms of that, law enforcement, yeah. And I guess there's like, specific, yeah, there's like, specific what was I guess specific goals, right? If you're in law enforcement, it's not like you're not necessarily going for a submission really at that point. You're really trying to get them to, let's say, like a handcuffing kind of position, like there, or a position where you're in control and you can take control of their limbs so they're not thrashing about. So I guess like how was I guess like did you just like derive that from from your security experience, or is there like law enforcement, like you have like, I guess you probably trained law enforcement before that, right? And then
Yeah.
that's what led to it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, these questions are great. Like, dude, you got some serious insight into so many different things. It's refreshing and great questions. So, um, there was a bunch of law enforcement officers at the school that I was at,
Mhm.
and we would do this thing like after every class where, sheesh, I don't even really remember how it started, but
Okay.
they would ask like questions of like, okay, this happened in the field.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what would you do in this kind of situation?
Got
And
it.
it just became this thing where it was like every day after the noon class,
Mhm.
we would all like get together and discuss like all the different situations or things that happened in the field, or like just how you were saying, every uh, ending to the fight, submission, how the fight ends in jiu-jitsu is just not the same
Yeah.
for someone in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Like,
It's not necessarily a viable scenario for someone in law enforcement to
right.
necessarily end up in that kind of situation. Yeah.
They have to get the medical attention after
Mhm.
that, and, like, okay, what are you gonna do? Like, break the submission, and then, like, you still need to handcuff them?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it just becomes such a nightmare, so you need to make sure, like, every technique ends in a handcuffing procedure,
Mhm.
and really, in a lot of ways, the goals of jiu-jitsu are to get the fight to the floor,
Mhm.
and a lot of times in law enforcement, the goal is the exact opposite,
Yeah.
to, keep the fight standing, or even, I have a takedown system in there where I make considerations for this, and every takedown results in you still standing and they end up on the ground. So to
Yeah.
be able to have that ability to, not get into a grappling fight is an important goal for law enforcement as well. So the instructional took a lot of like meeting with law enforcement, like
Mhm.
hearing what they had to say, hearing like the struggles that they have to deal with,
Mhm.
and kind of being able to shape and mold jujitsu, um, based on what they were telling me that they were dealing with.
Got it. So you had like a lot of pretty much like live like Q&A in terms of law enforcement situations, and I think that's yeah, I think that's good. Well, and of course, I mean, there's only so many like situations you can be prepared for, right? I mean, it's just volatile is kind of the nature of the job. Like there's no like, oh well, let me just look in the handbook what to do in this
Right.
situation here. Sometimes it's really just making the most of it. So I think that's very interesting, and yeah, as you said, unique kind of grappling experiences where yeah, maybe you don't want to be end up having to roll around or want to minimize that like as much as possible because they're just of the circumstances like one probably cement, probably a hard kind of floor, not going to be as forgiving as mats, and then maybe debris. There's a lot of situations like different situations there. So that's really interesting. That's interesting how that was your first instructional like there. And I guess like after doing that, like what was the feedback like for it? Like how did like what I guess what did you learn most like after doing your first instructional?
Oh man, the feedback was awesome. That's probably my favorite part. I had literally people from like all around the world message me that the instructional like helped them. I had uh, like law enforcement officers in Australia
Oh wow.
uh, contacting me like, dude, your instructional, like it helped me like go home safe to my family, like thank you so much. And like um it almost brings a tear to my eye. I even remember like extreme situations where guys messaged me that work in like maximum security prisons, and they have to like deal with these really difficult situations, and that they were able to use the instructional to help them to make sure that not only they were safe, that the actual inmate was safe as well. So that means the world to me, and man, that was so cool.
Yeah, that's gotta be because once again, I mean, like we talked about in the beginning, you don't know exactly who's gonna get like the that because access is out there, but that's yeah, it's like continents away, like your knowledge was like being used, and that's or was being shared, and that's I mean that's the power of I guess just all the like you said all the information being available out there like that you know wasn't possible maybe even what like 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
especially in this kind. So I guess like I guess that's a pretty good question. So I guess like nowadays, let's as you teach, let's say like as you're teaching like beginners, because it is like a very different like environment than the one that you started in. When there's like a bunch of like information out there, like what would you suggest like if someone's just starting out? I guess of course it really depends on like them as a student, but like I guess like what like how do you have people like I guess navigate, because like I guess sometimes like what I see, this may not necessarily happen to like most beginners, but sometimes there's almost like information kind of overload where there's just so much information out there like you don't even know necessarily like to begin. And let's just say like in the general standard, if somebody wants to get into like BJJ and they're like I just don't really know like where to start, and they don't quite have like an athletic base like to stand on, like are there any like starting points or any like general points that you would want a beginner to begin in?
Yeah, even transitioning off of your last question too, some questions that I get a lot are from like law enforcement officers that are like, I really want to train.
Mhm.
I saw your instructional; it was great, but like, can you recommend a school for me and that kind
Mhm.
of thing? So that's a question that I get a lot. So the two top things that I look for is I look for a good fundamentals program where there's actually a class engineered for beginners. Jiu-Jitsu has an unfortunately high dropout rate, and
Mhm.
there are some schools that just are not organized in their sense of, um, you go in there and you're sort of a training partner for some killers, and,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
fresh meat if you will, but yeah.
yeah, and having a school that transitions the person into training in a positive, safe way, I think is so important in a fundamentals program. But also, I think it's really important for the school to talk with the student and understand what the actual goals are
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
the student.
Yeah.
Because, there could be so many different goals of the person that's walking into a martial arts school.
Yeah.
And I look for schools that are trying to help them with their goals and even like meet with them to see if they've like accomplished their goal and to have that good fundamental program so that they could really actually help them with the thing that brought them in the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that that's a good place to start. I think what you said about like just in your own awareness, having your own self-awareness of how you best learn, like kinesthetically, auditorily, and visually, I think are all also like really important, like good places to start and like to know about yourself.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean that's where I'd probably begin
Yeah.
when looking for a school.
I think those are great points, especially just because yeah, different people have different goals. Like some let's say like a 16-year-old kid that wants to join has different goals or reasons than maybe like a let's say like 45 50 year old like gentleman who just like wants to like a different like a just wants a place like to learn or or to a person that's in law enforcement trying to gain skills. Like they like all three have different goals and to what brings them in, and that's gonna definitely dictate like what they're, I guess, how they train and what they're training for. So I guess understanding that is like is is very important, because yeah, all three of those are going to approach training in like a different way just because they're going after different things.
For sure. I couldn't agree more.
Okay. And I guess in I guess like Ryan, so like you're currently like recovering. I guess like what do you what's your advice for people that are kind of in a similar position as you, where yeah, they upgrading the software, but the hardware is not necessarily being able to be accessed right now. Like what's the, I guess, how do you like, yeah, what's how how do you navigate that? Like what's your yeah, how do you like still be learning without actually having your body is kind of limited at the moment.
You're asking the tough questions, the tough questions.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, good question. Tough question, but good question. So that I think that the area of um, like just the somatic kind of culture has like been changing and has sort of upgraded lately. I'm super blessed to have so many like really intelligent physical therapists,
Mhm.
to have really intelligent like biomechanics specialists that I work with on a regular basis to try to help me like come back to training. And I think incorporating a smart and intelligent way uh, to exercise, I think is really important.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the jujitsu moves they're kind of thrown out there as like natural body movements and like
Yeah.
that it's 100% like the healthiest possible thing.
Yeah.
But like that's maybe not necessarily the case. Like good examples, Hickson Gracie right now is
Mhm.
using some biomechanics training to like supplement his injuries and
Mhm. Mhm.
to get back into to actually really teaching and being a part of jujitsu, which I think is so great. And just like if you're in the actual classes and like have a body that's like really healthy, like be so grateful that like you get the
Yes.
opportunity to
Mhm.
be able to train and be like thankful that you were allowed another day to train. Um, so I think that that's also really important too. And I would say that like that the number one hindrance I see of people getting slowed in their development
Mhm.
is actually injuries. So
Yes. Yes.
if you have some sort of biomechanics regimen, if you look into, um, there's so many different like modalities of ways that you could help your body. I mean, I struggle to say one particular one or another because
Yeah.
each one has their own positives and negatives as well.
Yeah.
But just to be intelligent and to take care of your body and to have a goal of longevity in mind, to
Oh yeah.
not be injured and try to stay on the mats as long as possible. It's a consistency game. So
For
the
sure.
longer you get on the mats, the better you're going to be. And then to just be absolutely grateful that you have the opportunity to train if you do. Now, as far as upgrading like my own knowledge and like studying, I have like hold on right here.
Mhm.
I have like flashcards from like
Okay.
instructionals, and like I'm going through them, and I'm always looking at different things. And fortunately, I have a lot of students, so I use them as my guinea pigs, and I can
Yeah.
teach them things and see how well they're taking to it, and
Got it.
show them new concepts or ideas, and I could see like how they are able to grow and use that for themselves. And
Mhm.
in a way, I'm learning it as well with them
Yeah.
as they're learning it too. So
Got it. It's like a learning by proxy. You're like, okay, it's working because you see it working with them. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think that's a great point you brought up too. Just long longevity, and especially, that's something that most beginners may not be thinking about, but is, yeah, as you said. I've seen that for sure. Like, injuries are a big hindrance to training, especially if you're a beginner. That could be especially if you're only like a few months in, few months out. That's time that you could have spent like learning, where you could have doubled like what knowledge that you had. Like, sometimes one of the best abilities to gain is availability in terms of that. And
great,
uh,
great quote, great quote.
yeah, I think that's yeah, and I think that kind of goes down to, as well, like we're talking about earlier, like just awareness, not just of the how you learn, but also like how you move, like in terms of biomechanics, right? Because you can kind of tell, if you're maybe not as flexible like one way, or maybe not, maybe like tight when you're moving in a general direction. It's like, and I think it comes with like with body awareness, just as more as you're being able to move through space. But yeah, just figuring out what's like what are there, like weak points, or are there necessarily like not strong points like for you, just because, yeah, it's all about, yeah, it's all consistency and volume. That's really ultimately what matters most. And sometimes people just go at it like a bit too intensely, and then have to have to motor it down, not because they want to, but because they have to, because
Yeah.
of circumstances. So I think that's something definitely good for anyone to consider, but especially like beginners wise, like understanding like how their body moves, and how they how they operate in space. Yeah.
Yeah, just one quick point, then I actually want to ask you a question.
For sure.
Is I think a lot of just to speak to beginners, a lot of the starting phases of jiu-jitsu is being able to learn how to control your own body, so that
Yeah.
you are learning to be able to control other people's bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But that learning how to like control and move your own body is a serious like all those books on the bookshelf behind you,
Yeah. Yes.
like endeavor, not just okay, can I do a bridge, or can I shrimp across the mat?
Mm-hmm.
But that is such a huge topic, and it is a fundamental element that, of course, you have to have some understanding of how to do to even be able to gain any type of success,
Mm-hmm.
but to also carry with you throughout your entire career or your entire training time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
For sure. Yeah.
So the question I want to ask you, this is like the Pankration philosophy podcast, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a huge lover of philosophy myself, and I was just curious, like what philosophies you've come into contact with during the podcast or during your training that you sort of see within the training and you see within life, and just any philosophy that you found interesting from your martial arts journey as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, given, and of course, given the name of it, Pankration, of course, like stoicism, like that was, a big part of it. And then just because there's a lot of, there's a lot. I mean, martial. I mean, you can't really separate the war like from the martial arts. So definitely, I looked into a lot of. Yeah, there's like stoicism. There's like Marcus Aurelius, definitely one of the big ones there. But I've also, of course, looked into a lot of, I guess the Eastern martial arts, or not just martial arts, but also their philosophies. Sun Tzu, Art of War, like a classic one there. And it's interesting. The more you look at, it's always like what's interesting, like to me, because the more you look at. The more you look at martial arts, and then I guess just understanding your history, I guess, and weapons, it's like what like how combat's done, whether it's like one-on-one or whether it's done on a larger scale. It really kind of boils down to like to really simply art of war kind of like fighting in terms of really has not changed in about thousands of years, no matter like the component, like the people that do it definitely have changed, like the components, the things that we do, but at the kind of similar to what you're talking about, like kind of like the boiling, if you boil down the concepts of it, it's really not that much different than what what our ancestors like were doing. So I guess that's like one interesting point, like that I see, and then that's why I kind of see the usefulness of being able to see from what past masters have been able to look at. Of course, another classic one, what was Musashi's book? Was it the Book of Five Rings? Yeah, samurai. It's it's just quite fascinating, and just how people that didn't know English and that didn't know that their works were going to survive like this long, how it can still pertain to somebody that's that's doing this thousands of years later. That's kind of why I enjoy, of course, like the philosophy aspect, but just connecting that with the physical aspect. That have we come a far way from from more Marcus Aurelius and where Sun Tzu and Musashi were? Yes, but in terms of the mind, like have we really come that far? Maybe maybe not really. Maybe we haven't come so much. Maybe there's definitely still some good lessons like to learn like from the past. So that's kind of what made me want to of course love to discuss this with other people. And that's kind of what the show's about. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question there, Ryan.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a huge fan of Musashi and Sun Tzu and all the people you mentioned.
Yeah, and it's just it's just funny, like when you read something, you're just like, oh wow, it's almost like I get maybe confirmation bias, like I was already kind of thinking like that, but then to see how someone already said this like way before, like, oh, I didn't invent this thing. I guess someone already thought of it. It's kind of it's like, oh yeah. So I guess if anything, kind of reinforces that, like, oh yeah, there's just some good central concepts that people kind of figured out. And if anything, martial arts is kind of just rediscovering that in like maybe different contexts, but yeah, it's very interesting to me. Yeah.
It reminds me of once you know the way broadly, you'll see it in all things.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. That's a great one.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that it's a great concept. Yeah. That's the thing. It's like once, because you start to see, like, I think what one of my coaches like told me, like, once like if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And then I was like, yeah, that really is like a beginner kind of thing. But like, once you get more of a tool set, you realize, oh, just because I can use this tool doesn't mean it's necessarily the best tool like for the job. And there may be something else, like as you get more and more refined. And that's really part of the learning and growing process. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's what I definitely enjoy seeing. But
that's a good one. I love that one.
Yeah, but yeah, appreciate that question, Ryan. And I guess we're kind of heading like towards the end of this, but yeah, are there any like any points that you want to make before we take off? Yeah.
I mean, nothing that comes to mind. I really just, I thank you for your time. I was like, man, what quote
Yeah.
could I think of? I was like, pankration,
Yeah.
philosophy. This guy probably likes a lot of Greek stuff. I'm
Yeah.
feeling, philosophy origin is like Greek, and pankration is also its origins was in Greece as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, pankration was the ancient sport of the Greeks that combined wrestling and like striking arts. So
That's awesome. I'm also a huge Bas Rutten fan.
of course, yes.
And so is my dad. My dad actually showed me Bas Rutten, and
Oh man, boss.
he's the best. He's the
Oh
best.
yeah. It's like boss is great because it's like if they took a martial arts cartoon and just brought him out to life, and then he's just operating in the real world because that's
Yeah.
like that's pretty much how he talks, his like mannerisms. But then yeah, he actually does like knows the stuff, and some great some great early like pioneering fights in MMA before like it was even called like MMA like there when it was just guys in boots hitting each other in Japan.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, where you're watching, you're like, what kind of weird show you're watching there? But yeah, it's it's definitely interesting in terms of history. Well, I guess like Ryan, like before we take off, like how can somebody let's say they heard something, if they wanted to like to know more about you or hear more about your stuff, like how can they follow you? Like, is there like a website, or how can they get more information about you? Yeah.
Appreciate the layup plug, but I have a YouTube channel with a lot of free content,
Nice.
almost 300 videos on there, and you can check it out anytime. It's BJ Fanatics Black Belt Ryan Scialoia. And then any of my instructionals on BJ Fanatics are also great to check out as well. I appreciate that. And if anyone has any questions on anything, I love to get messages from people. So please feel free, message me anytime with any questions. Instagram's probably a good way to contact me. Facebook too. And man, I just really appreciate your time, and I'd love to come back on the show if you'll have me. I have a ton more. I have a ton more philosophy topics I wanted to run by you too, and man, I just appreciate it so much. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate your time, Ryan. And I guess like just in case people are, I mean, this is video, but there's also like audio of this. In case somebody could you just like spell out your name, your last name, just in case they, don't know how to phonetically go about it.
That's a great point. Thank you. It's Ryan, which is obviously Ryan, and then the last name is Scialoia, Scialoia. I gotta like change my name or something. I know because it's tough, but
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. You're like, oh, man, SEO, this is not working. But yeah, okay. Thank you so much for your time, Ryan. And yeah, thank you everybody for listening in, and take care.
Awesome. Have a great night, my friend.
Thanks. You too, Ryan.
Bye-bye.